So far, inaugural season has been pretty fun, and today we're back with Chapter 3 as we fly Hawaiian Airlines from Seattle across the ocean to Tokyo and Narita. Now, Hawaiian has served Tokyo for quite some time, but this will be their first route from Seattle after the new acquisition by Alaska Airlines, and we're here to test out the journey. So use those timestamps below as we look at the future of this new Hawaiian-Alaska merger and the inaugural experience. For the most part, in Seattle, Hawaiian uses the S gates, so their check-in is located pretty close to that. Fortunately, there's not too much of a line considering this flight leaves in the afternoon and most of the Hawaii flights leave in the morning. Now, if you were flying Hawaiian to Hawaii and flying out of those S gates, you're located right next to the security checkpoint that's most convenient for that. However, since we are technically an Alaska flight, just operated by Hawaiian, we are out of the N gates, so it's a short hike across the airport to get to the security checkpoint that's closer to that. Seattle has long been Alaska's biggest hub. As such, they have a pretty big operation here, but now after the acquisition of Hawaiian Airlines, those operations are growing much larger, demanding more check-in space. So Alaska's check-in is fairly small as they begin construction on a big, new flagship check-in experience. Security in Seattle is kind of a mess. Even with clear, it took me about 30 minutes, and I heard some pre-check lines were taking over an hour. Once through, however, because of how big and spread out Seattle's airport is, we have to take a train to get to most concourses, especially our concourse in the N gates, which is a satellite terminal. Personally, the N gates in Seattle are some of my favorite, and because it's slightly closer to the runway, you get pretty good ramp views. The lounge policy was a bit interesting to me, however, considering Hawaiian doesn't have a lounge here and they're not officially part of One World yet. I do have One World status, but not through Alaska, so I was curious if I'd get in on an economy ticket. They told me that as long as you're One World Emerald on an international ticket, you can still get access. So I welcome you to my favorite of Alaska Airlines' lounges here in Seattle. If you watched my Alaska video last year covering their brand new lounge in San Francisco, you'll know that this lounge shares some pretty similar characteristics, as most new Alaska lounges do. And this one's fairly new considering it opened in 2019. It has similar features such as a fireplace, great ramp views, new lighting and an upgraded buffet, and food that rotates more often throughout the day. They did have a bar in the back corner with a special cocktail for this inaugural flight, but other than that, there was plenty of spaces to relax without it getting all that crowded. The only bummer is that there isn't any showers in any of the Alaska lounges here in Seattle. It was also from the lounge that we got the best view of the aircraft that would be taking us to Tokyo. Hawaiian Airlines operates more A330s than any other type, and this is one of those examples. This A330-200 November 384 Hotel Alpha is a 13-year-old aircraft, still with the older interior that we'll see once we get on board, but with the newer livery, not seen a few years ago. They did begin some of the celebration for us while we were up here in the lounge, including some great foods like mochi and onigiri, native to Japan. But I had a bigger celebration waiting for me down at the gate, so without further ado, it's downstairs to the party. This N-Gate Alaska lounge actually just happened to be right above my gate. So it was a quick walk down the stairs or elevator to get down to that lounge space, but even before I got there I could see the amount of people hanging out waiting for this party, even though the events hadn't actually started. Once we got over there, the first thing that you saw was a nice photo op station set up, showing the Alaska and Hawaiian brands and showcasing the route. It also had some great views of our aircraft waiting for us outside, with the Tokyo Narita showing on the departure board for the first time. The celebration included a few things, starting with some traditional Japanese drumming performances. I'm going to let some of this play out for you guys so you can appreciate some of the showmanship that these guys gave us. And then we got the speeches. There was a collection of people starting with their traditional Hawaiian blessing, followed by the VP of Communications for Alaska Airlines, the Alaska Airlines CEO, and the Hawaiian Airlines CEO after that, and wrapping it up with the Port of Seattle Commissioner. Once they all gave us a great speech, they then had their ribbon cutting before they opened up some snacks for us all down here in the gate. Interestingly enough, the same ones we were offered up in the lounge. After that, it was a little while of people buzzing around, mingling, talking, and especially meeting the two CEOs of the two carriers that were merging before it was time to board, and fortunate enough to let some of us media people on board first. Remember that outdated interior I was talking about? Welcome on board the outdated A330 cabins of Hawaiian Airlines. If you're curious about the business class experience, check out my video last year where we flew the longest domestic flight in the United States, which just so happens to be operated by Hawaiian Airlines. But behind that is economy and extra comfort. Interestingly, the extra comfort seats operate similarly to premium economy on most carriers, just in relation to the amount of amenities that they get, even though they just look like normal economy seats with some extra legroom. Behind that, however, is the regular economy seats, and where we will be seated for today's inaugural flight out to Tokyo. These seats haven't really been updated in the 14 years since this aircraft was delivered, still rocking that cool blue headrest, but the blue wave-like stitching on the seats. There's an armrest on either side, one of them with the button for recline, and you can see the amount of recline here. The seat recline's not too bad. You can see the seat cushion also slides forward with it. Each seat generally has about 1 to 2 windows, although on this seat you can see most of my view obstructed by the wing. In front of you there is a seatback TV, although it is an older style, and it's next to a USB port that didn't really charge my device, it just slowed the speed at which it died. Then is a tray table below that, still another old style, but big enough to fit whatever you've got with you, and a pocket below that that's also pretty big. The legroom in these seats really isn't all that great considering this is a high-density configuration meant for leisure travelers. There is, however, a good amount of space underneath the seat for storage. Unfortunately, that's because there is no extra boxes for in-seat charging, so that USB port next to the TV that doesn't really work, that's kinda your only charging option. And unfortunately, there's no overhead air vents. Just because we're in economy doesn't mean we don't get any amenities, however, as we still got a bedding bag, including a pillow that was fairly small and thin, but the blanket they gave us was actually pretty nice. We also got the amenity for the inaugural flight, which was a little tote bag. Inside, we found a letter about the inaugural, a ceramic crane, and a bag tag for the inaugural flight to go with some sencha tea. Not the greatest inaugural amenities, but I'm just glad that we got something back here in economy. And the last bit that we got is an amenity kit, if you want to call it that, but I'm still glad to have the earphones, which is somewhat standard, but we got earplugs and an eye mask, which isn't a given in economy. The Alaska-Hawaiian merger has opened up a new market for them, so where do we see them go from here? At the time of merger, Hawaiian was struggling financially big time, and people thought that Alaska way overpaid for the acquisition. But if used correctly, the airlines can create something that can compete better globally, currently the world's 13th largest airline. It appears that Seattle is their future as Hawaiian becomes Alaska Junior. The airline has already begun shifting aircraft from Honolulu to Seattle by pulling planes from other markets, like switching most West Coast routes to Alaska ops instead of Hawaiian, or just swapping wide bodies for narrow bodies. Any potential Florida plans seem to be dropped, and Austin, which was canceled to enable A330s to relocate to Seattle for twice daily Anchorage flights and new Asian routes. The airline has begun using Seattle's location as their marketing strategy, as Seattle's 10% closer to most major cities than San Francisco and Los Angeles, the hubs for other major airlines. Leveraging shorter routes, they hope to launch 12 international routes from Seattle in the next 5 years. This began with Tokyo, announced last year as a major trans-Pacific gateway with one-world connections. Japanese Hawaiian tourism has historically been a cornerstone for Hawaiian Airlines, but it didn't bounce back post-pandemic, so they've canceled the Narita route from Honolulu and shifted the slots to Seattle. They'll be the 4th carrier to serve this route, but hope to find help through joining the Trans-Pacific joint venture with American and Japan Airlines for code-shared connections. The 2nd edition was recently announced to be Seoul, launching in September, also with an A330. These flights are Alaska's, but operated by Hawaiian. Alaska Airlines CEO stated that the routes will be independently operated by Hawaiian for the next few months as the operations will continue merging. They have Hawaiian paint and crew, but not yet under the full Alaska and One World umbrella, at least until next year. While we don't have any official plans yet, they have confirmed that European routes will launch in Q2 of 2026. Europe's tougher as Seattle's perfectly placed for connections to Asia, but most airports that connect passengers to Europe have their own services or connections through even shorter flights. For Asia, it seems they want to grow more one-stop connections from the middle of America to places without flights to Asia like Boise or Kansas City. This means Manila would likely be their next destination, although they have previously floated Chinese destination plans. For Europe, London and Paris have been in Hawaiian's plans for a long time due to high levels of Hawaiian tourism. They couldn't reach Europe from Honolulu with the A330, so when they got the 787s, it sounded like we'd see Honolulu to London. With a Seattle hub now, it's more likely that we see the routes from Seattle, offering connections into Hawaii. Less exciting and way more competition, but more profitable for the airline if they can pull it off. The competition is what worries me, however. They've planned to upgrade their A330s for a little while, sounding like next year is the date for that. The CEOs shared with us that the International Experience, as they called it, would be launching later this year. No details on what that means, but Honolulu did announce a new flagship lounge 5 times the size of their current one. Plus, it sounds like Seattle may be getting new long-haul facilities like flagship lounges as well. When the 787s were rolled out, they had the benefit of added premium capacity. Alaska announced the plan is to move these 787s to Seattle. The airline just picked up their third, and as of September, the 787s will be pulled out of LAX and moved to Seattle double daily. Recently, however, Delta announced that all trans-Pacific flights will shift to A350s, so that is Hawaiian's competition. Even alliance partners like Japan Airlines serve the route with Apex Suite-equipped 787s. The thing that worries me is Hawaiian's identity. This has been a concern of Islanders for a while. If you watched last year's Alaska video, you've heard about Alaska Airlines leaving Alaska for Seattle. Now, the Alaska markets are the secondary focus of the airline, and I'm worried that Hawaiian is going in that same direction. It was a bummer as it was cloudy on our departure from Seattle, so we couldn't see those Olympia mountains. Also, just after departure, they asked everyone to close their window shades, like within 10 minutes of departure. What's the point of paying for a window seat at that point? It wasn't long after when they came by with the beginning of the first meal service, starting with a bag of savory snack mix and drink choice. I went with one of my favorite Hawaiian Airlines beverages, the Maui Brewing Company Lager. Then they came by with the cards offering us pasta or chicken as our meal choices. I decided to go with the pasta, and it came with a cheesy pasta with tomatoes. On the side was cheese and crackers and a little salad. And if you know Hawaiian Airlines, you know that for my main course, I had to get the passion orange guava nectar, as it's been a Hawaiian Airlines staple as an island favorite, and it was one of the biggest fears with the Alaska merger, although the Hawaiian Airlines CEO stated that they have no plans to discontinue the signature drink of the airline. It may seem like a small thing, but it's a big piece of the brand loyalty. And then the meal wrapped up with ice cream and one more choice of drink. Shortly after that, they passed out immigration forms for Japan. There was the immigration and the customs form, so we could fill those out and expedite our process on arrival. And then the seatback entertainment options, where they actually had a fairly good selection, including some from the islands, like Moana, for example. There was a good amount of movies and TV shows, although I found it somewhat difficult to sort through them, so once you do find something you want, make sure to save it to favorites. But I did like that the TV shows they had at least had full seasons. Unfortunately, the map that was available on the seatback TV wasn't interactive, just went through a slideshow of pre-selected screens. One thing that I do like about Hawaiian Airlines' in-flight entertainment is that they have installed Starlink Wi-Fi on their long-haul aircraft like the A330. They were the first aircraft to use them, and it means that once you connect to the portal, for no cost at all, you can get some of the fastest Wi-Fi in the skies. I mean, I was watching Netflix on this flight without any buffering whatsoever. I saw that there might be some mid-flight snacks, and while I didn't see any snacks, in each of the galleys they had the drink carts set up, so anyone could come over here and set up some water, ice, soft drinks, whatever it was that you wanted. As you might know, each of Hawaiian Airlines' planes is also named after a specific constellation, and in the galley they have plaques describing what those constellations mean. I was pleasantly surprised by the size of the economy class lavatories with Hawaiian Airlines. Not only is it big, but I really like that floor pattern. Sure, the sink area is basic, but they do also have some of the best smelling soap. I did get quite a bit of sleep on this flight considering it was just over 11 hours. The seat recline, as we saw, wasn't too bad, except because the seat cushion slid forward a bit as part of the recline, it did rob some of the legroom, which was already limited. I did get about 4 hours of sleep with the blanket, however, which was pretty warm for an economy class blanket. And then it was time for our final meal of the flight, which started with a hot towel. Only the second time I've ever gotten a hot towel in economy, the first time being with China Southern. For this meal, we were given the choice of meatballs or pasta, and I decided to go with the meatballs, which was the right choice. It came with a side of cubed melon, but the main course was teriyaki meatballs and stir-fried rice. It was absolutely incredible and one of the most tasty meals, as Hawaiian's catering is known to be strong. Economy class meals are generally known to be basic, and this one, all served on one tray, was fairly small. Definitely smaller than the first meal, but considering we'd be on the ground in less than 2 hours, that was okay, as after my Sprite and my Hawaiian pineapple cookie, it was time for landing. Alaska is currently the 5th largest airline in the country and 13th in the world. Looking back 10 years, Alaska has had a solid West Coast market, mostly in the Northwest, but needed California and eastward expansion. This began when they purchased Virgin America. They gave them a sizable San Francisco hub and secondary hub in Los Angeles. They proved that this was only for slots, as they shed the entire brand and fleet. All the things that made Virgin America loyalists love the airline. Growing as a major American carrier, they found Hawaiian flights as their bread and butter. This put them at need for assistance again in 2019 as Southwest launched Hawaii flights, stealing market share from Alaska. Coincidentally, Hawaiian Airlines was looking for a buyer as they'd been growing debt and shrinking profits, and a merger seemed to be their only lifeline. Alaska offered them roughly $2 billion, plus they'd assume a roughly $1 billion of debt. Creating the Alaska Air Group, Hawaiian bought long-haul fleets, Alaska brought medium-haul, and Alaska's wholly owned regional carrier Horizon supplied the short-haul. The Department of Transportation initially had issues with the merger. They worried that Alaska would hold too much market share on Hawaii flights, with concerns of monopolies on multiple routes. Those who live on the islands were nervous about losing an airline that shared their identity. Alaska assured that it would retain the Hawaiian brand and protect jobs for those on the islands, who rely on the employment of their flagship airline. Plus, they'll be maintaining inter-island routes and continue investments in the community like Hawaiian has done for years. With the merger nearly complete, the two airlines seemed to have their initial plan ironed out. When Alaska acquired Virgin America, it took them a couple years for all the aircraft to be made into Alaska. It sounds like they plan to maintain Hawaiian Airlines instead, as the long-haul product, although it's kind of an interesting plan. If they do launch European flights, it means you could fly from Europe to Asia through Seattle on Hawaiian Airlines, which just feels strange to me. From a continuity standpoint, I wish it would just become Alaska. On the other hand, Hawaiian Airlines is one of my favorite airlines. The island vibes are just unmatched, and I'm not sure what I'd do if that disappeared, let alone the native Hawaiians. Correct me if you can think of an example, but all inaugurals are a good thing for the industry. When the merger between Alaska and Hawaiian was announced, there were so many question marks. Hawaiian was struggling but serving one of the world's largest tourism markets, which is historically unprofitable. Last year when I covered Alaska Airlines in a couple videos, the merger outcome was all speculation, but now we have a better idea. The focus on Seattle makes me nervous as I feel like over time it'll make Hawaii a smaller cog of Hawaiian Airlines, a B-tier location of sorts. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like we've seen this script in other parts of the world. The fleet and staff is useful, but Seattle remaining as the main hub can create interesting logistics. The product is another thing. Last year we covered their first 787 flight in business class. The closed-door suites are much more industry standard than anything they've had before. Those aircraft have been on Hawaiian's highest premium demand routes, but now Alaska will be using them to launch new routes. Although I'm a bit surprised they didn't begin with those. Launching the route with an A330 just feels a bit odd as it's uncompetitive in all cabins. With 787s being brought to Seattle, maybe that'll change though, or maybe we'll see Europe launched. Either way, those A330 renovations will be a good sight, even if they're about 5 years later than they probably should have been. Hawaiian's soft product has always been one of my favorites, however. The food, even in economy, is some of the tastiest meals in the skies. I had the pasta as my first meal, but the chicken looked even better, then the teriyaki meatballs with fried rice. The competition's economy meals are nowhere close to this quality, plus they don't have POG. Not to mention, they're one of the only airlines in the world with hot towels and amenity kits for economy passengers. And lastly, the inaugural. Last week when we flew with KLM, I remarked that it was one of the saddest inaugurals I had gone to. Until a return flight leaving San Diego, there was nothing that even lets you know it was an inaugural flight. This was a nice return to normalcy. We got the regular inaugural party. Snacks were tasty, speeches were nice, and some great performances. I was curious to see if the inaugural would focus more on Alaska, Hawaiian, or Japan. The answer is that it kinda lacked identity, I felt like. I mean, it was nice, but it kinda feels weird as they share the spotlight with two airlines. The Japanese culture performance was definitely a highlight, and they chose some good snacks. That closes out inaugural number 3, however. We're back in Tokyo, where inaugural number 1 departed only 2 weeks ago, and now I see how fast I can get to Glasgow for our next event. Until then, however, safe travels, and I'll see y'all next time.